The teacup trembled in Vivian Caro's hand, a hairline crack of weakness she despised herself for showing. Lady Constance's voice carried across the winter garden with practiced sweetness, each word dipped in honey and arsenic. Of course, Lady Pemberton, finding reliable companions is such a trial these days. Some forget their station entirely. They mistake proximity for belonging. Constance's pale eyes fixed on Vivian as she said it. The three ladies, seated around the table, followed her gaze with delicate, knowing smiles. Vivian set the teapot down carefully, her face a mask of composure she'd perfected over 3 months of service. She'd learned quickly that Lady Constance preferred her humiliations subtle, a raised eyebrow here, a pointed silence there. Today felt different. Today felt like the beginning of something worse. "More tea, Lady Ashford?" Vivian's voice came out steady, professional. "No, dear. I think we've had quite enough." Lady Ashford's dismissal was gentle, almost pitying. The winter garden's glass walls trapped the afternoon light, making everything feel overexposed. Vivian could see her own reflection in one of the panels, a young woman in a dove-grey dress that marked her as neither family nor servant, suspended in that peculiar purgatory reserved for impoverished gentlewomen who'd fallen from grace. She'd fallen spectacularly. Breaking an engagement publicly after discovering her fiancé in his mistress's arms might have been morally correct, but society didn't reward moral correctness in women. It rewarded silence. Vivienne had never been good at silence. The sound of boots on marble made everyone turn. Julian Blackwell, Duke of Greystone, filled the doorway with the kind of presence that didn't need announcement. 4 months back from the war, and he still moved like a soldier, efficient, alert, slightly dangerous. Vivian's breath caught as it did every time she saw him. She hated herself for it. "Stepmother, I need to discuss the Northern Tenants' petition." His voice was clipped, formal. Constance didn't even look at him. "Not now, Julian. Can't you see I'm entertaining?" "It's urgent." "Then it can wait. Lady Pemberton was just telling us about her daughter's upcoming debut. Weren't you, Lady Pemberton?" Julian's jaw tightened. Vivian saw it from her position near the serving table, the small muscle that jumped when he was frustrated. She'd catalogued all his tells without meaning to. The way he rubbed his left temple when exhausted, the slight softening around his eyes when he thought no one was watching, the absolute stillness that came over him when he was truly angry. He was still now. "Of course," he said quietly. "Forgive the interruption, ladies." He turned to leave, but not before his eyes swept the room and landed for just a fraction of a second on Vivian. That single glance carried weight she couldn't name. Recognition, maybe, or shared frustration at Constance's calculated coldness. Vivian looked away immediately, as she'd been trained to do. Dames de compagnie didn't hold the gaze of dukes, especially not dukes they found themselves thinking about at inappropriate hours. But Constance had seen it. Vivian knew by the slight narrowing of her employer's eyes, the way her smile sharpened into something predatory. "Miss Caro," Constance said sweetly, once Julian had gone. "Fetch my blue shawl from my chambers. The cashmere one. I find myself quite chilled." It was 70 degrees in the winter garden, but Vivian knew better than to point that out. "Of course, my lady." She curtsied and left, grateful for escape even as she wondered what Constance was really planning. The blue shawl was a pretense. Constance never felt cold, and she certainly didn't need cashmere in a greenhouse. Vivian climbed the main staircase, her footsteps muffled by thick carpet. Greystone Hall was beautiful in the way old money always was, understated, permanent, utterly confident in its own worth. She'd grown up in a house not unlike this, before her father's gambling debts consumed everything. She knew what it was to belong to these spaces, and she knew more acutely what it was to no longer belong. Constance's chambers were in the East Wing, rooms that had belonged to the late Duke's wife before Constance had claimed them. Vivian moved through the familiar space, finding the shawl exactly where she expected it. As she turned to leave, voices drifted through the adjoining door, the small sitting room that connected Constance's chambers to a private study. The door stood slightly ajar. Vivian froze. "You humiliate her publicly. Why?" Julian's voice low and angry. "Because you watch her, Julian, and that is dangerous." Constance's response was matter-of-fact, clinical. Vivian's heart began to pound. She should leave. She should take the shawl and go immediately, but her feet wouldn't move. "I don't know what you're talking about." Julian's denial came too quickly. "Don't insult my intelligence. You look at Miss Caro the way your father looked at me, before he married me and realized I was more useful than decorative. But you're smarter than your father, aren't you? You won't make that mistake. Constance, you'll marry Lady Helena Ashford. It's arranged. The announcement will be made in 2 weeks at the ball. Her father has already agreed to terms." Silence. Vivian pressed herself against the wall, clutching the shawl so tightly her knuckles went white. "You had no right." Julian's voice was dangerously quiet. "I have every right. You've been back 4 months and done nothing but brood in your study and avoid your responsibilities. You're 34 years old. You need an heir. Lady Helena is perfect, well-bred, biddable, and her father controls half the parliamentary votes you'll need for your agricultural reforms. I never agreed to this. You don't need to agree. You need to show up, smile, and do your duty to this family. That girl in there," Constance's voice turned sharp, "is a distraction you cannot afford. She's a scandal waiting to happen, Julian. Everyone knows what she did to Lord Whitmore, breaking an engagement in public, causing a scene. That's who she is. Chaos. She exposed a liar and a cheat. She humiliated a peer of the realm. There's a difference. In our world, there's always a difference." Vivian heard footsteps, Julian pacing most likely. She knew she should move, should announce herself, should do anything but stand here listening to her life being dissected like a specimen. "I won't marry Helena." Julian's voice was final. "Then you'll lose Greystone." The words fell like stones into still water. "What?" "Your father's will had conditions, Julian. Marry within 2 years of inheriting to a woman from an approved family, or control of the estate passes to me as trustee until you comply. You've wasted 4 months. Helena is approved. She's also your last viable option this season. Reject her and I'll invoke the clause. You'll be Duke in name only. I'll control every decision, every coin, every tenant's fate. That's extortion. That's legacy. Your father knew you'd come back from war changed. He wanted to ensure you didn't destroy what took generations to build. Marry Helena. Make it easy. Or make it hard. Either way, the outcome is the same." More silence. Then footsteps, sharp and retreating. A door slammed somewhere deeper in the chambers. Vivian exhaled shakily. She needed to leave now, before... "You can come in, Miss Caro. I know you're there." Constance's voice was amused, conversational. Vivian's stomach dropped. For a wild moment, she considered running, but there was nowhere to run to. Nowhere in this world that would take her if Constance decided to destroy her completely. She stepped into the doorway of the sitting room, the blue shawl draped over her arm like a flag of surrender. Constance stood by the window, backlit by afternoon sun, looking exactly like what she was. A woman who'd married power and learned to wield it expertly. "You heard everything, didn't you?" Constance smiled. "Good, now you understand." "My lady, I wasn't." "Don't lie. You were listening at the door like a common servant. But I'll forgive it this once because it saves me the trouble of explaining your situation." Vivian said nothing. Her mind raced, trying to calculate how bad this was, how quickly she needed to pack, where she could possibly go. "You've been useful, Miss Caro, truly. You're intelligent, efficient, and you handle the social niceties I find tedious. but you've also become a problem." Constance moved closer, her silk skirts whispering against the floor. "My stepson has developed an unfortunate fascination with you. It's not your fault exactly. You're pretty in that tragic, doomed sort of way men find irresistible, and you have just enough scandal attached to your name to seem dangerous. But Julian needs stability, not danger. He needs Helena. I've done nothing to encourage—" "I know. That's the problem. If you'd thrown yourself at him, he'd have been disgusted. But you've been perfectly appropriate, perfectly distant, perfectly tempting." Constance's smile was almost sympathetic. "So I'm going to make this very simple for you." She moved to a small writing desk and picked up a sealed letter. "This is your reference. Glowing, actually. It will get you a position with Lady Thornbury in Bath. She's a friend, elderly, kind. You'll be comfortable there, away from London, away from Julian." Vivian stared at the letter like it was a snake. "You have 5 days to leave." The words hit like a physical blow. 5 days, Constance repeated, savouring each syllable. "The ball is in 2 weeks, but I want you gone well before then. Use the time to say your goodbyes, pack your things and leave quietly. After the engagement is announced, your presence here would be problematic for everyone. My lady, please, I need this position. I have nowhere—" "You have Bath. Lady Thornbury is expecting you. It's more than generous, considering." Constance held out the letter. 5 days, Miss Carrow. I suggest you use them wisely." Vivian took the letter with numb fingers, her vision blurred at the edges. 5 days. After 3 months of walking on eggshells, of pretending she didn't feel what she felt, of maintaining perfect propriety, she was being dismissed like a housemaid caught stealing silver. "That will be all," Constance said gently, dismissively. "You can bring the shawl when you return to the winter garden. Our guests are waiting." Vivian turned blindly toward the door. She made it 3 steps before her legs nearly gave out. She grabbed the doorframe for support, took a breath, and forced herself to keep moving. She didn't see Julian standing in the shadowed alcove of the connecting corridor. Didn't see the way his face had gone white, his hands clenched at his sides, didn't see the terrible, dawning realization in his eyes. But Constance saw. She smiled. Vivian fled down the servants' stair, unable to face the main halls where she might encounter anyone who would ask why she was crying. She reached her small room on the 3rd floor, barely larger than a closet, but it had been hers, and closed the door. The letter crumpled in her fist. Bath, Lady Thornbury, a new position, a new exile. She'd learned to survive exile. She'd done it after the Whitmore disaster. She could do it again. But it hurt more this time. Because this time, she was leaving something real behind. She'd been so careful not to feel anything for Julian Blackwell. She'd catalogued his kindnesses clinically, the way he always thanked servants by name, the late hours he spent working on tenant reforms, the gentleness in his voice when he spoke to his elderly aunt. She'd noted his attractiveness the way one notes weather, objectively, without personal investment. She'd lied to herself spectacularly well. Until 3 weeks ago, when he'd found her in the library at midnight. She'd been unable to sleep, seeking comfort in books the way she always did. He'd come in without seeing her, had stood at the window looking out at the dark grounds with an expression of such profound loneliness that her heart had cracked open. "Can't sleep either," he'd said quietly, finally noticing her. "No, Your Grace. Julian. When it's just us, call me Julian." She shouldn't have. But she had. And they'd talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing. Books, war, loneliness, duty, the weight of expectations. He'd laughed at something she said, a real laugh that transformed his entire face, and she'd realized with crystal clarity that she was in terrible danger. After that night, she'd avoided him more carefully. But avoiding someone you saw every day was impossible, and every accidental meeting, every past glance, every brief conversation just made it worse. Now she had 5 days to stop feeling what she felt, 5 days to pack up hope and bury it somewhere it couldn't hurt. A knock on her door made her jump. "Miss Carrow?" One of the housemaids, Sarah, peeked in nervously. "Lady Constance is asking for you, says you've been gone too long." Of course she had. Constance would want to watch her return to the winter garden with puffy eyes, would want the other ladies to see and speculate. Another small humiliation to remind Vivian of her place. Vivian splashed cold water on her face from the basin, smoothed her dress, and pinned her composure back in place like armor. She'd survived worse. She would survive this. The shawl. She'd forgotten the shawl upstairs. She retrieved it quickly and made her way back to the winter garden. The ladies were still there, now discussing the upcoming season with the comfortable superiority of women whose positions were unassailable. "Ah, Miss Carrow, I'd begun to think you'd gotten lost." Constance's smile was warm, concerned, perfect theatre for her audience. "My apologies, my lady. I took a wrong turning." "How unlike you. You're usually so capable." The gentle reproach was masterful. Lady Ashford was just leaving. Would you see her to her carriage? Dismissed again, but this time Vivian was grateful. She escorted Lady Ashford through the marble halls, making appropriate murmurs as the Viscountess chattered about her daughter's prospects. They'd just reached the main entrance when Julian emerged from his study. He stopped dead at the sight of Vivian. His eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her want to run. Had he heard? Did he know? "Your Grace." Lady Ashford curtsied. "We were just leaving. Such a lovely afternoon." "Lady Ashford." Julian's voice was distant, automatic. He wasn't looking at the Viscountess at all. He was looking at Vivian, and there was something in his gaze that made her chest tight. "I'll just see myself out, shall I?" Lady Ashford glanced between them with poorly concealed interest. "Do give my regards to dear Constance." She swept out, leaving them alone in the vast entrance hall. "Miss Carrow." Julian stepped closer. "I need to speak with you." "Your Grace, I don't think—" "My study. Now, please." It wasn't quite a command, but close enough. Vivian glanced toward the winter garden where Constance would be watching, waiting. "I really should return to Lady Constance." 5 minutes. His voice dropped. "Vivian, please." The use of her first name shocked her into movement. She followed him into the study, hyper-aware of the impropriety, the danger, the way her heart hammered against her ribs. He closed the door, stood with his back to it, looking at her like he was trying to solve an impossible equation. "I heard," he said finally. "I heard what she said to you." Vivian's breath stopped. "Your Grace." "Julian. You called me Julian once. Do it again." "I can't. It's not appropriate." "Nothing about this is appropriate." He moved closer, then stopped himself, maintaining careful distance. 5 days. She's giving you 5 days to leave. She's offered me a position in Bath. It's generous, really. It's exile. It's necessary." Vivian forced the words out. "She's right. Your engagement to Lady Helena. There is no engagement. I never agreed to it. But the will, damn the will." The profanity was soft, vicious. "She's been planning this for months, hasn't she? Waiting until I was back, settled, vulnerable. She knew exactly how to trap me." "You should marry Lady Helena." Vivian said it firmly, trying to believe it. "She's everything," Constance said. "Well-bred, appropriate, politically advantageous. And I'm—" She gestured to herself, the dove-grey dress, the precarious position, the scandal that followed her like a shadow. "I'm nothing you need." "You're everything I didn't know I needed." The words came out raw, unguarded. Vivian felt tears threaten again. "Don't, please, don't say things like that." "Why not? Because it's true, because we both know it." Julian ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I've been trying not to feel this for months, trying to convince myself you were just anyone, but you're not. Every time I see you, Every time I hear your voice, every time you smile at something ridiculous." He stopped himself. "I'm doing this badly." "You're doing this impossibly." Vivian's voice broke. "You're a duke. I'm a disgraced companion with no money, no family, and a reputation for causing scenes. Even if you weren't being forced into an engagement, even if there was no will, no conditions, no constants, we still couldn't. The world doesn't work that way." "Then the world is wrong." "The world doesn't care about right or wrong. It cares about propriety and position and who belongs where." She backed toward the door. I'm so sorry, but I can't do this. In 5 days I'll be gone, and you'll marry Lady Helena, and eventually you'll be glad this conversation never happened." She reached for the door handle. "Vivian." She stopped but didn't turn around. "I'm not going to let her do this. You don't have a choice." "There's always a choice." Now she did turn, and what she saw in his face made her heart ache. Determination, defiance, and something that looked dangerously like hope. "Please don't fight this," she whispered. "You'll lose everything. Your home, your title, your ability to help all those tenants you care so much about. I'm not worth that. Let me decide what you're worth. Julian, go to Bath if you must. Take the position. But 5 days isn't forever, and I'm not finished fighting yet." Before she could respond, before she could tell him how foolish and impossible and heartbreaking that was, voices echoed in the hall outside. Constance's distinctive laugh, coming closer. "Go," Julian said quickly. "Through the side door. I'll distract her." Vivian slipped out just as Constance entered the main door. She pressed herself against the corridor wall, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. Julian's voice carried through the open study door. "Stepmother, I was just coming to find you, about that Northern Tenants petition." Vivian didn't wait to hear more. She fled to her room, locked the door and sat on the narrow bed with her head in her hands. 5 days. She had 5 days to leave before she destroyed everything Julian had worked for, everything he was trying to build. 5 days to stop loving a man she could never have. She looked at the crumpled reference letter from Constance, still clutched in her hand. Bath, safety, distance, but Julian's words echoed in her mind. 5 days isn't forever. She should pack. She should start preparing to leave. She should protect him from himself and his impossible reckless hope. Instead, she smoothed out the letter, folded it carefully, and put it in her desk drawer. Not yet, not tonight. Tomorrow she would be sensible. Tomorrow she would start packing. Tomorrow she would accept reality. Tonight she would let herself imagine impossible things. The next morning brought rain, the kind of persistent English drizzle that matched Vivian's mood perfectly. She'd barely slept, spending most of the night composing and discarding mental letters, explaining why she had to leave, why Julian shouldn't fight for her, why this was for the best. None of them sounded convincing, even to herself. She dressed carefully in her second-best gown, saving the best for Constance's inevitable social events, and went down to breakfast. Companions ate in the smaller morning room, not with the family, but not quite with the servants either. Another reminder of her liminal existence. But when she entered the morning room, Julian was there. He stood by the window, dressed for riding, looking out at the rain-soaked grounds. He turned when she entered, and the intensity in his gaze made her consider retreating. "Good morning, Miss Caro." "Your Grace." She bobbed a curtsy, hyper-aware that they were alone. "I wasn't expecting... That is, I usually... Breakfast alone?" "I know. I asked the staff about your routine." He gestured to the small table set for two. "I thought we might talk, properly, without Constance or propriety or panic." "Julian, this isn't wise." "Probably not. But I've discovered that the wisest things I've done in my life have felt unwise at the time." He pulled out a chair. "Please, have breakfast with me. Let's pretend, just for an hour, that we're simply two people who enjoy each other's company." It was the worst idea possible. It would make leaving harder. It would give Constance ammunition if she found out. It would hurt more when it ended. Vivienne sat down. They ate in companionable silence at first. Eggs, toast, jam, the comfortable ritual of an English breakfast. The rain pattered against the windows. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed 8 times. "Tell me about Whitmore," Julian said finally. "The real story, not the society gossip." Vivian's hand stilled on her teacup. "Why?" "Because Constance called you chaos, called you a scandal. But I watched you manage 3 social dragons yesterday with more grace and intelligence than most diplomats I've known. That's not chaos. So I want to know what really happened." She set down the cup carefully. She'd told this story before, to people who didn't believe her, who thought she'd invented drama to escape an unwanted match. She'd stopped trying to defend herself. But Julian was looking at her like her answer mattered, like he actually wanted to understand. "We were engaged for 6 months, she began slowly. "Frederick Whitmore, Lord Whitmore's youngest son. It was a good match, everyone said. He was charming, attentive, everything proper. My father was pleased. It would settle his debts, secure my future. I thought I might even love him eventually. But you didn't. No. Because 3 weeks before the wedding, I went to his townhouse unannounced. I'd forgotten my gloves there the previous day, wanted to retrieve them. The butler was flustered, tried to tell me Frederick wasn't home, but I heard him upstairs laughing with someone." She smiled bitterly. "I should have left. That's what a proper lady would have done. But I'd read his diary the week before, found it by accident, and seen references to love letters essentially. I thought perhaps I'd misunderstood, that it was old, that I was being paranoid. But you weren't." "No. I went upstairs, found him in his study with Caroline Pemberton. Yes, that Lady Pemberton's daughter. They were not being proper, and when he saw me, he didn't apologize. He laughed, said I should be grateful he'd found entertainment elsewhere, since I was so boringly virtuous, said the marriage would proceed as planned, but I shouldn't expect fidelity. That's not how their world worked." Julian's hands had clenched on the table. "And you broke the engagement." "Publicly. At the Havisham ball that very night, in front of 300 people, I announced that I couldn't marry a man who treated both his fiancée and his mistress with such contempt. I didn't name Caroline. That was the one mercy I showed, but everyone knew anyway. Society loves a good guess. That was brave. That was stupid. Frederick's father destroyed mine financially within weeks. My mother stopped speaking to me. My invitations dried up. The only reason I'm not completely destitute is that Constance was looking for a companion and found my situation amusing." Vivian looked at Julian directly. "So yes, I'm scandal. I'm chaos. I'm everything inappropriate, and I won't let you sacrifice your future for me. What if I want to? Then I'll save you from yourself. Vivian, Julian, please." She stood abruptly. "You've been kind to me, kinder than I deserve. But in 4 days I'm leaving for Bath, and you're announcing your engagement to Helena Ashford, and that's how this ends. Anything else is fantasy. What if I refuse to announce the engagement? Then Constance invokes the will's conditions. You lose control of Greystone, and hundreds of tenant families suffer because you were too stubborn to do your duty." She forced steel into her voice. "I know what it's like to choose personal truth over social obligation, Julian. I know what it costs. Don't make my mistake." She walked to the door, needed to escape before she said something even more foolish. "Vivienne." She paused, didn't look back. 4 days isn't long enough to stop caring about you." Her throat closed. She left without responding, because what could she possibly say? The rest of the day passed in a blur of tasks. Constance had her organizing correspondence, arranging flowers, confirming details for the ball. Busy work designed to keep her visible, Remind her of her temporary position. Make clear that Vivian was a convenience soon to be discarded. She glimpsed Julian twice, once in the portrait gallery, speaking with the estate manager, and once in the entrance hall, leaving for a tenant meeting. Each time their eyes met. Each time she looked away first. By evening she was exhausted. She retreated to her room early, claiming a headache that wasn't entirely false. She pulled out her single trunk from beneath the bed, opened it, stared at the empty space. 4 days. She needed to start packing, needed to make this real. She managed to fold 2 dresses before someone knocked. Miss Carrow. Sarah again, looking apologetic. Lady Constance wants you in the drawing room. Says to wear something nice. There's a dinner guest. Vivian's stomach sank. She knew, without asking, who the guest would be. She changed into her best gown, dusky rose silk that had been her mother's before the family's fortunes turned. It was slightly out of fashion, but still beautiful, still made her look like she almost belonged in these spaces. The drawing room was lit with dozens of candles, warm and elegant. Constance stood near the fireplace in emerald silk, looking regal. And beside her, smiling politely, stood Helena Ashford. Lady Helena was everything Vivian wasn't. Perfectly blonde, perfectly proper, perfectly comfortable in her position. She looked at Vivian with mild curiosity, the way one might examine a moderately interesting insect. "Ah, Miss Carrow. Come in. Lady Helena has joined us for dinner. She'll be staying at Greystone for the next week to help with ball preparations. Won't that be lovely?" It was a calculated move. Put them in the same house, let Helena establish ownership, remind Vivian daily of what she could never be. "How do you do, Miss Carrow?" Helena's voice was sweet, gentle. She probably wasn't intentionally cruel. She probably didn't even know she was a weapon. "Very well, Lady Helena. Welcome to Greystone. Julian speaks highly of the estate, though I've barely seen him since I arrived this afternoon. Is he always so devoted to his work?" "His Grace takes his responsibilities very seriously." Vivian kept her voice neutral. "Yes, Constance mentioned. She said you've been helping him with various administrative tasks. How unusual." There it was. The delicate reminder that Vivian's position was irregular, inappropriate, soon to end. "Miss Carrow has been invaluable," Constance said smoothly. "Though, of course, once you're mistress here, Helena, you'll want to establish your own systems. Miss Carrow is actually leaving us soon. She's accepted a position in Bath." "Oh? How sudden." Helena looked genuinely sympathetic. "I hope it's not on my account." "Not at all, my lady. It's an excellent opportunity." The lie tasted like ashes. Julian arrived then, entering the drawing room with barely concealed reluctance. He saw Helena first, managed a polite smile. Then he saw Vivian, and something flashed across his face. Frustration, longing, anger at the situation. "Lady Helena, I didn't realize you'd arrived." "This afternoon, Your Grace, your stepmother was kind enough to extend an invitation for the week. I hope that's acceptable?" "Of course." He moved to the drinks cart, poured himself whiskey with slightly more force than necessary. "How was your journey?" They made polite conversation. Vivian stood near the window, technically part of the gathering but functionally invisible. She watched Julian perform his role. Attentive host, respectful suitor-to-be. She watched Helena bloom under his attention, sweet and hopeful. She watched Constance watch her, satisfaction in every line of the older woman's posture. This was her future. 4 more days of this. 4 days of watching Julian be slowly claimed by someone else, watching her own existence shrink to nothing. Dinner was worse, 8 courses of exquisite torture. Vivian sat at the far end of the table where companions belonged, while Helena sat beside Julian. Constance orchestrated the conversation brilliantly, drawing out Helena's accomplishments, her family's connections, her suitability. "My brother mentioned you might be interested in agricultural reforms, Your Grace," Helena was saying. Father has several contacts in Parliament who could be helpful. He's very eager to support your work. That's generous. Julian's voice was carefully neutral. And Helena plays the pianoforte beautifully, Constance added. Perhaps after dinner you'll favor us with something, my dear? Oh, I couldn't possibly. Please do, Julian said quietly. I'd like to hear you play. Vivian's fork clattered against her plate. She recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. Julian glanced at her, and their eyes met across the length of the table. She saw apology there, resignation, the beginning of acceptance. Her appetite vanished completely. After dinner, they retired to the music room. Helena played competently, choosing a Mozart sonata that showcased technical skill without excessive emotion. Constance and Julian sat in comfortable chairs, the picture of family contentment. Vivian stood near the door, ready to be dismissed at any moment. When the piece ended, they applauded politely. Helena blushed prettily. I'm terribly out of practice. Miss Caro, do you play? It was asked kindly, without malice. Somehow that made it worse. A little, Lady Helena, but not as well as you. I'm sure you're too modest. Constance mentioned you were well-educated before. She trailed off, realizing she'd stumbled into uncomfortable territory. Before I ruined my reputation, Vivian supplied with a tight smile. Yes, I had lessons, but I'm afraid my skills are rusty. Perhaps we could play together sometime this week? I find duets so much more enjoyable than solo work. She meant it as kindness, an inclusion. But Vivian heard the unintentional condescension, the future Duchess extending gracious charity to the temporary companion. That's very kind, but I'm afraid I'll be rather busy preparing for my departure. Oh yes, your position in Bath. When do you leave? 4 days. Vivian met Constance's eyes as she said it. I have exactly 4 days left. The remainder of the evening dragged. Eventually, Constance dismissed her with a wave. Miss Caro, you look exhausted. Do retire. We won't need you further tonight. Vivian curtsied and fled. She climbed the stairs to her small room, closed the door, and finally let herself breathe. A note had been slipped under her door while she was at dinner. She recognized Julian's handwriting immediately. Library midnight, please. She should refuse. Should pretend she never saw it. Should protect them both from whatever desperate, foolish thing he was planning. Instead, she waited until the house fell silent. Until she was certain Constance and Helena had retired. Until the clock struck 12. Then she slipped down the servants' stair to the library, heart pounding, knowing this was dangerous and reckless, and everything she shouldn't do. Julian was waiting by the window, still in his dinner clothes, looking out at the moonlit grounds. He turned when she entered, and the expression on his face made her chest ache. You came. I shouldn't have. I know, but I'm grateful you did. He moved closer, maintaining careful distance even now. I can't do this, Vivian. I can't smile at Helena and pretend you don't exist. I can't watch you fade into the background while Constance orchestrates my future. I can't. He stopped himself. I'm doing this again, being too much. You're being honest. Honest doesn't change anything. His voice turned bitter. Constance made sure of that. The will, the conditions, the political alliances. She's locked every door except one. Marry Helena, preserve Greystone, do my duty. Then do it, Vivian whispered. Do your duty. And let you leave, let you go to Bath and pretend we never... He stopped. What did we do exactly? Talk a few times. Share a dance we haven't had yet. Feel something we never acted on. Maybe Constance is right. Maybe I'm building fantasy out of nothing. You're building hope out of impossible circumstances. That's different. Is it? He stepped closer, close enough now that she could smell cedar and whiskey and something indefinably him. Tell me you don't feel it. Tell me I'm alone in this and I'll let you go. I'll marry Helena. I'll smile through the announcement. I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. But tell me honestly, do you feel nothing? Vivienne closed her eyes. This was the moment. The moment where she could lie, could protect them both, could sacrifice herself cleanly and completely. But she'd spent too many years lying to herself about other things. She was so tired of lying. "I feel everything," she said quietly. "I've felt everything since that night in this room when you laughed at something I said and looked at me like I was real, like I mattered. Like I wasn't just a scandal or a mistake or a woman who didn't know her place." She opened her eyes, met his gaze. "I've been trying not to feel it, trying to be professional and appropriate and temporary, but I failed, spectacularly. And now I have 4 days to leave before I make it worse, before I cost you everything that matters. You matter. Not more than hundreds of tenant families who depend on you. Not more than your duty to your title. Not more than—" He kissed her. It wasn't gentle or cautious. It was desperate and hungry, and everything they'd been holding back for months. His hands framed her face like she was precious, breakable, essential. She grabbed his jacket to stay upright, the world tilting dangerously. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I can't lose you," he said raggedly. "I can't watch you walk away. Tell me you'll stay. Tell me we'll find another way. Julian, I don't care about the will. I don't care about Constance's conditions. I'll find a way around them. You'll lose everything." She pulled back, forced herself to create distance. "And I won't let you. 4 days, Julian. I have 4 days. Let's not make them harder than they have to be." "So that's it? You'll just leave?" "Yes. And I'm supposed to marry Helena? Pretend this never happened?" "Yes." "Vivienne, please." Her voice broke. "Please don't make this impossible. It's already breaking me. Let me leave with some dignity intact. Let me believe I did one selfless thing in my selfish life." She left before he could respond, fled back to her room, and finally let herself cry. Great, gasping sobs that she muffled in her pillow, grief for something that never was and never could be. In the library, Julian stood alone in the darkness, tasting her on his lips and hating every responsibility that had ever been placed on his shoulders. 4 days. He had 4 days to find an impossible solution. 4 days to choose between duty and everything that mattered. Morning brought Helena Ashford to breakfast in the morning room, cheerful and determined to be helpful. Vivienne arrived to find her already seated, pouring tea with the comfortable authority of someone who belonged. "Oh, good, you're here." Helena smiled warmly. "I was hoping we could review the guest list for the ball together. Constance mentioned you've been managing correspondence?" "Yes, Lady Helena." Vivienne sat, accepted tea, tried to summon professional detachment. "Please, just Helena when we're private. We'll be seeing quite a lot of each other this week. No need to stand on ceremony." She pulled out a ledger filled with names and addresses. "Now Constance wants 300 guests, but the ballroom can only comfortably hold 250. We'll need to make cuts. What do you think? Political allies first or social obligations?" It was a test, Vivienne realized. Not malicious, just assessing. Helena wanted to know if the companion had actual skills or just pretensions. "Political allies will serve His Grace's reforms," Vivienne said carefully. "But social obligations, particularly with families who've supported Greystone for generations, ensure stability. Perhaps we could find creative solutions, invite some guests only for the ball itself, others for the dinner before. That expands capacity without overcrowding." Helena's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that?" She made notes enthusiastically. "You see, this is exactly why I need help. I've never managed an estate this size. Father's house runs itself, really. Mother handles everything. But when I'm Duchess here—" She caught herself, looked at Vivienne apologetically. "I'm sorry. That was presumptuous." "Not at all. It's the expected outcome." Is it? Helena set down her pen. I'm not entirely sure Julian expects it, or wants it, really. He's been polite, correct, but there's something missing, some spark or connection, or she trailed off, studying Vivian with suddenly sharp eyes. You care about him. It wasn't a question. Vivian's teacup rattled in its saucer. Lady Helena. Helena, please. She leaned forward. I'm not blind, Miss Caro, and I'm not cruel. I've watched the way he looks for you in rooms, the way you both become carefully neutral around each other, the way Constance watches you both like a hawk watching field mice. I don't know what you think you've observed. I think you're in love with him, and I think he might be in love with you, and I think Constance has positioned me as the obstacle between you. Helena's voice was surprisingly kind. I'm not sure how I feel about being used as a weapon. Vivian stared at her, speechless. I agreed to this arrangement, Helena continued, because Father said it was advantageous. Because Julian is kind and honorable and would make a perfectly adequate husband. Because I'm 23 and running out of acceptable options. But I didn't agree to destroy someone in the process. You're not destroying anything. The situation is complicated. By Constance's manipulation, yes. She told me you were leaving for Bath, said it was your choice, an excellent opportunity. But you don't look like someone embracing opportunity. You look like someone being exiled. Vivian's throat closed. She'd expected judgment from Helena, perhaps superiority, not this devastating kindness. It doesn't matter what I want, she managed. Julian needs an appropriate marriage. Greystone needs stability. Your father's political connections will help him achieve real reforms. I'm a scandal with no family, no prospects, and no business interfering in ducal politics. You're a woman he cares about. That should matter more than politics. In novels, perhaps. Not in real life, Helena sighed. No, I suppose not. She returned to the guest list, but her enthusiasm had dimmed. Well, shall we continue? These invitations won't organize themselves. They worked in uncomfortable silence for an hour. Helena was intelligent, organized, genuinely trying to learn. Under different circumstances, Vivienne thought they might have been friends. Under these circumstances, Helena was simply one more reminder of everything Vivienne couldn't have. Julian appeared at 11 looking for Constance. He stopped when he saw them, something complicated crossing his face. Helena bent over papers, Vivian explaining seating arrangements, the picture of Duchess in training and helpful companion. Your Grace, Helena brightened. Perfect timing. We're debating whether the Pembrokes should sit near the orchestra or the refreshments. Do you have an opinion? The Pembrokes are tone-deaf and gluttons. Put them near the refreshments. He said it absently, his attention on Vivian. Miss Caro, a word? It wasn't phrased as a request. Helena glanced between them. I'll just review these notes in the gallery. Take your time. She gathered papers and left, tactful and perceptive. The door closed. Julian moved closer. You kissed me last night and ran away. Vivian kept her eyes on the guest list. I shouldn't have let you kiss me. It was inappropriate. It was honest. And you said I mattered. His voice dropped. Did you mean it, or was that just another thing to run away from? Julian, please. I talked to my solicitor this morning about the will, the conditions, possible alternatives. Her head snapped up. No, Julian, no. You'll just make Constance suspicious. Constance is already suspicious. She's been suspicious since the day I came back and looked at you for the first time. She knows Vivian. She's always known. Then you're just proving her right. You're giving her ammunition to what? Force me to marry Helena to save the estate? She's already done that. The question is whether I let her win or whether I fight. You can't fight this. The will is legal. The conditions are clear. If you don't marry Helena, I lose control of Greystone. Yes, I'm aware. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. But there might be alternatives. If the marriage clause hasn't been formally triggered yet, If we can prove Constance manipulated the timeline, if we can find evidence that my father was coerced into including the clause, those are enormous ifs, and while you're chasing them, Constance is planning your engagement announcement for the ball. 2 weeks, Julian. You don't have time for legal challenges. Then what do you suggest? I just give up. Marry Helena and let you disappear to Bath? Yes. No. He stepped closer, backing her against the table. Not threatening, just present. Undeniable. I spent 2 years in war watching men die for duty, for causes they barely understood, for systems that didn't value them. I came back here thinking duty was all that mattered, that if I just followed the rules, did what was expected, sacrificed what I wanted for what I should want, everything would be fine. Julian, you made me remember that there's supposed to be more than duty. That caring about someone, choosing someone, fighting for someone, that matters too, maybe more. His voice roughened. I'm not giving up. I'm not letting you walk away without fighting, and I'm certainly not marrying Helena while feeling like this. Then you'll lose everything. I'll lose everything if I let you go. The intensity in his eyes made her dizzy. This was Julian without masks, without political calculation, without the careful control he wore like armor. This was the man who'd laughed with her in the library at midnight. The man who'd listened to her story about Whitmore and called her brave instead of scandalous. This was the man she was trying so desperately not to love. 3 days, she whispered. I have 3 days left. Can we just exist for 3 days, without fighting about futures we can't change, without making this harder? Vivian, please, 3 days where we're just us, whatever that is. Before I go to Bath and you announce your engagement and we both do what we're supposed to do. It was cowardice, probably, delaying inevitable pain. But she was so tired of being strong, being practical, being the one who walked away first. Julian looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. 3 days, but I'm not giving up, Vivienne. I'm just giving you time. Time for what? To realize that some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible. He left before she could respond. Vivienne sank into a chair, shaking. 3 days. She had 3 days to memorize everything about him before losing him forever. 3 days to pretend impossible things might somehow become possible. The next 2 days blurred together in a strange, suspended reality. Helena was kind and inclusive, asking Vivian's opinion on everything from flower arrangements to menu selections. Constance watched with satisfaction, clearly believing Helena was establishing dominance, and Julian found excuses to be near Vivian constantly. He needed her opinion on tenant contracts. He wanted her present when the estate manager reported on repairs. He requested she accompany him on property inspections, since she'd been managing correspondence and knew the details. Constance couldn't object without revealing suspicion. Helena seemed bemused, but not threatened, and Vivian found herself spending hours alone with Julian under the flimsy pretense of duty. They walked the grounds, supposedly reviewing drainage issues. They stood in his study, supposedly organizing documents. They sat in the library, supposedly cataloguing books that needed repair, and they talked about everything, nothing, the future they couldn't have. What would you do? Julian asked on one of their walks, the 3rd day before her departure. They were supposedly inspecting the tenant cottages, but they'd stopped in a small grove of trees, hidden from the house. If you could do anything, be anywhere, what would you choose? Vivian considered. The answer felt dangerous. I'd want choice. The ability to choose my own path without every decision being dictated by what others think I should do. Not wealth or position necessarily. Just freedom to be myself without apology. That's not selfish. That's human. It's impossible for women like me. We're defined by what we can provide others. companionship, respectability, decorative presence. We exist in service to systems that don't actually value us. She looked at him. What would you choose? This. The word came without hesitation. Exactly this. Walking with you, talking honestly, not performing for anyone, not being the duke or the heir or the political asset, just Julian, with someone who sees me as just Julian. The longing in his voice made her chest ache. We can't have this, she said quietly. We're having it right now. For 2 more days, then it ends. Does it have to? You know it does. He stopped walking, turned to face her fully. Vivienne, if there was a way, any possible way to be together, would you take it? There isn't a way. Hypothetically, if I could solve the will, manage Constance, convince society, would you want this? Want us? It was cruel to ask. Cruel to make her admit it aloud when nothing could change. Yes, she whispered, but wanting doesn't make it possible. It makes it worth fighting for. Before she could respond, before she could explain again why fighting was futile, hoofbeats echoed from the direction of the house. They moved apart quickly, putting proper distance between them. A groom appeared, looking apologetic. Your Grace, Lady Constance requests your presence urgently. Something about the ball preparations. Julian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Tell her I'm coming. The groom left. Julian looked at Vivienne with frustration and longing and determination. 2 days, he said. 2 days, and then I'm making a choice, whether you approve or not. He left before she could argue, striding back toward the house with military precision. Vivienne stood in the grove alone, heart pounding. She knew that look, that determination. Julian was planning something reckless. She needed to stop him before he destroyed everything. That evening, Constance hosted a small dinner party, 20 guests, all carefully selected to witness the growing connection between Julian and Helena. Vivienne served as companion, hovering in the background, nearly invisible, nearly. She felt Julian's eyes on her throughout the meal, felt his attention even when he was speaking to Helena about agricultural reform or discussing parliamentary strategy with Lord Ashford. Every time she moved, he tracked her. Every time she looked up, he was watching. Helena noticed too. During dessert, when Vivienne was meant to be checking with the kitchen about port, Helena caught her in the hallway. He's going to do something foolish, isn't he? Helena's voice was resigned, not angry. Something that will ruin him. I don't know what you mean, Lady Helena. Please, I'm many things, but I'm not blind or stupid. She glanced back toward the dining room where laughter echoed. He looks at you the way my father looked at my mother before she died, like you're necessary for breathing. And you look at him the same way, even though you're trying desperately not to. Vivienne's composure cracked. It doesn't matter. In 2 days I leave for Bath, and you'll announce your engagement at the ball. That's how this ends. Unless he refuses to announce it. He won't refuse. He can't afford to. Love makes people afford impossible things. Helena's expression was sad, knowing, I thought I could do this. Thought I could marry a man who loved someone else. Thought it would be enough to be Duchess, to have respect and position and duty. But watching you both pretend... She shook her head. It's cruel to everyone. What are you saying? I'm saying I won't be party to this charade much longer. If Julian wants to marry me, he needs to actually want it. Not just accept it as inevitable. She moved closer, voice dropping. Miss Caro, Vivienne, if there's any way to make this right, any solution that doesn't destroy him, find it. Because I genuinely care about Julian. And I won't let him marry me while in love with you. That's not the marriage I want. She walked away, leaving Vivienne stunned in the hallway. Helena was removing herself as an obstacle. Not completely. Not yet. But she was opening a door. The problem was, there was still no way through it. Vivienne returned to the dinner party in time to see Constance raising a glass. A toast, the Dowager was saying, to Julian and Helena. May your future together bring joy to Greystone and all who depend on it. Glasses clinked. Guests murmured approval. Helena smiled with practiced grace, and Julian's eyes found Vivian's across the room, something fierce and desperate in his gaze. She shook her head slightly. Don't do anything reckless. He looked away first, jaw set in that stubborn line she'd come to recognize. After dinner, guests played cards in the drawing room. Vivian was organizing correspondence in Constance's small office, adjacent to the main rooms, when she heard voices, Constance and someone else, in the hallway outside. Everything is proceeding perfectly, Constance was saying. Helena is charming everyone. Julian is cooperating mostly. And Miss Caro will be gone in 2 days, well before the engagement announcement. No complications. You're certain he won't object? The second voice was male, cultured, Lord Ashford, Helena's father. He has no choice. The will is ironclad. If he refuses to marry Helena, I invoke the clause and take control of the estate. He knows this. He's intelligent enough to accept reality. And the companion, you're confident she's not a threat? Vivienne Caro is a scandal with no resources and no options. She'll take the position in Bath because she has nowhere else to go, and once she's gone, Julian will move on. Men always do. I hope you're right. Helena deserves better than a husband pining for someone else. Helena will be Duchess. That's what she deserves. Everything else is sentiment, and sentiment fades. Their footsteps moved away, back toward the drawing room. Vivian sat frozen at the desk. Sentiment fades. That's how Constance saw love, as temporary weakness to be managed and dismissed. Maybe she was right. Maybe what Vivian felt for Julian, what she thought he felt for her, was just sentiment. Temporary, manageable. Maybe leaving for Bath was the kindest thing she could do for everyone. She gathered the correspondence she'd been organizing and left the office. She needed to get to her room, needed to think, She nearly collided with Julian in the servants' corridor. He grabbed her arms to steady her, and the touch sent electricity through both of them. They stood too close, breathing too hard, the narrow corridor feeling suddenly suffocating. I heard, he said quietly. I was in the side passage. I heard what Constance said. Then you know she's right. You know there's no alternative. There's always an alternative. Not one that doesn't destroy you. I'm already being destroyed. His hands tightened on her arms, gentle but firm. Every day I pretend I don't care about you. Every dinner I sit through with Helena. Every decision Constance makes for me like I'm a child instead of a grown man. That's destroying me, Vivian. Slowly, completely. But you'll survive it. You'll marry Helena, you'll have children, you'll do important work with your reforms, you'll have a full life, a good life. Without you in it, that's not a full life, that's just existing. Julian, come with me. He tugged her gently toward the back staircase, the one servants used, the one that was always empty at this hour. Where? Somewhere we can talk without Constance listening, somewhere honest. Please. She should refuse, should return to the drawing room, maintain propriety, protect them both from more pain. Instead, she followed him up the narrow stairs, through a corridor she'd never seen, to a small room at the top of the house. An old nursery, long disused, filled with covered furniture and dusty memories. Julian lit a single lamp. Golden light filled the space, making it feel intimate, hidden from the world. I used to hide here as a child, he said quietly. When my father was drunk and my mother was crying and everything felt too big and frightening. I'd come up here and pretend I was someone else, somewhere else, someone who had choices. We all want that when we're children. I still want it. He turned to face her. Vivian, I need you to understand something. I know you think you're protecting me by leaving. I know you believe sacrifice is noble, but you're wrong. The will, I don't care about the will. I don't care about Constance's conditions or Helena's expectations or society's judgment. I care about you, about this. about having one person in my life who sees me as human instead of asset. But the tenants will survive. The estate will survive. England will not collapse if the Duke of Greystone marries the woman he loves instead of the woman he's supposed to love. The word hung in the air between them. Love. You don't love me, Vivian whispered. You barely know me. I know you defended women others dismissed. I know you'd rather starve than compromise your principles. I know you read poetry when you think no one's watching, and you're terrified of thunderstorms, and you care so deeply about everyone except yourself that it's painful to watch. I know you make me laugh when I thought I'd forgotten how. I know you make me want to be better than duty and expectations. I know, his voice broke, I know losing you will be the worst thing that ever happens to me, and I survived war. So yes, Vivian, I love you, impossibly, inconveniently, completely. Tears spilled down her cheeks. This is cruel, you're being cruel. I'm being honest. For the first time in months, I'm saying what I actually feel instead of what I'm supposed to feel. Is that cruelty? Or is cruelty forcing me to marry someone else while feeling like this? You don't have a choice. Yes, I do. I can refuse Helena. I can invoke Constance's clause myself. I can step back from Greystone and find another way to live. Men do it. Peers have done it. It's scandal, yes. It's difficult, but it's possible. You'd lose everything you've worked for, your reforms, your political connections, your ability to help people. I'd lose you. That's worse. She was sobbing now, ugly and desperate. Julian, please, please, don't do this. Don't throw away your future for me. I'm not worth it. Let me decide what you're worth. He pulled her close, and she collapsed against his chest, crying into his jacket while he held her like something precious. I have a plan. It might not work. It might be terrible, but it's something. What plan? My solicitor found a possible challenge to the will. If we can prove my father was mentally incompetent when the marriage clause was added, if we can show Constance manipulated him during his final illness, the conditions might be invalidated. Vivian pulled back, wiping her eyes. That's impossible to prove. It was years ago, and even if you could, it would take months of legal proceedings. You don't have months. You have 2 days. I know. Which is why I need something else, something that forces Constance's hand before the ball. He hesitated. I need you to help me find it. Find what? Evidence. Proof that Constance has been manipulating estate finances, or forging documents, or anything that gives me leverage. She's been in complete control for months. She must have left traces. Julian. Even if that's true, we can't. Her office. Tonight, while everyone's still in the drawing room. She keeps private ledgers there, correspondence she doesn't want me to see. If we can find something, that's illegal. That's breaking trust. She's trying to control my entire life. That's breaking trust. Vivian stared at him. He was serious, reckless and desperate and serious. If we're caught, we won't be caught. Everyone's occupied downstairs. Constance won't leave the drawing room while guests are present. We'll have at least an hour. It was insane, risky. Everything she tried so hard to avoid. Vivian, please, help me fight for us. One last time. One last time. One final desperate attempt before she left for Bath, and he married Helena, and they both learned to live with permanent regret. 1 hour. She said, and if we find nothing, you let me leave. You announce your engagement. You do what's right. Agreed. But if we find something, then we'll figure it out. He kissed her forehead, gentle and grateful. Thank you. They waited until the clock struck 10, until the drawing room was thick with conversation and card games, until Constance was thoroughly occupied, entertaining Lord Ashford. Then they slipped down the back stairs to her private office. Julian used his master key. He had access to every room in the house, technically, but it still felt like trespass. The office was small, intimate, filled with Constance's personal effects. They worked quickly and quietly, searching drawers and files and correspondence boxes. Here, Vivienne found a locked drawer in the desk. "Can you open this?" Julian tried the keyring. The third key fit. Inside, private ledgers, letters, documents marked confidential. They spread everything on the desk, scanning quickly. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Estate finances, social correspondence, household accounts. Then Vivienne found a letter dated from 3 years ago, when the late Duke was still alive, but failing. "My dearest Constance, the clause has been added as you suggested. Julian will be required to marry within approved families or forfeit control. I trust your judgment in this matter as in all others. My son is brilliant but impulsive. He needs guidance. I grow weaker daily. Thank you for your devoted care. Edward." "This is it," Vivienne breathed. "Look at the handwriting. It's shaky, barely legible. He was clearly unwell." Julian grabbed another letter, this one from Constance's private stack. "Lord Pemberton, the marriage clause is secured." Edward signed this morning when his lucidity was at its lowest. The physician confirmed his mind was declining rapidly. "We need only wait for nature to take its course, and Julian will have no choice but to comply with appropriate matches. Your daughter Helena will be perfect when the time comes. I'll ensure it." "She planned this," Julian said slowly, "years ago, while my father was dying. She convinced him to add the clause, knowing he was too ill to understand the implications. And she's been orchestrating Helena's introduction ever since." Vivienne's hands shook as she held the letter. "This is fraud, legal manipulation. If this went before a court, the clause would be invalidated. The marriage requirement would be void." Hope flared in Julian's eyes. "Vivienne, this is it. This is the evidence we need. But using it means publicly destroying Constance's reputation. It means admitting your father was manipulated on his deathbed. It means scandal. I don't care. You should care. This will hurt Helena's family too. Her father was clearly in on this plan. Lord Ashford's political connections, all your reform allies will be damaged." Julian's hands clenched on the desk. "You're right. Using this nuclear option destroys everyone, including the political alliances I need." He looked at the letters, then at Vivienne. "But it gives me leverage. If I show this to Constance privately, threaten to make it public unless she backs down, she'll fight. She'll claim the letters are forgeries. She'll turn Lord Ashford and half of society against you. Maybe. Or maybe she'll realize she's cornered and negotiate." Before Vivienne could respond, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. They froze. Julian quickly gathered the most damaging letters, tucked them inside his jacket. Vivienne shoved the rest back into the drawer, locked it, put the key back exactly where they'd found it. The footsteps passed without stopping. They exhaled in unison. "We need to leave," Vivienne whispered. "Now. Before someone—" The office door opened. Helena stood in the doorway, shock clear on her face. "What are you doing?" Julian straightened, placing himself slightly in front of Vivienne. "Lady Helena, I can explain. You're searching Constance's private office together, alone." Helena closed the door quickly. "Do you have any idea how this looks? If anyone else found you—" "Helena, please. No. Stop." She held up a hand, voice tight. "I told Vivienne earlier that I wouldn't be party to this charade, that I wanted honesty. But I didn't expect—" She looked between them. "You're conspiring. Actually conspiring. Against Constance, against the engagement." "We found evidence," Julian said quietly. "Evidence that Constance manipulated my father into adding the marriage clause when he was mentally incompetent. Evidence that your father knew about it. Evidence that this entire arrangement is built on fraud." Helena went pale. That's impossible. Father said the marriage was simply advantageous. He never mentioned—" "He knew." Julian's voice was gentle but firm. "There are letters proving it. Dated correspondence between Constance and Lord Ashford, planning this years ago. Helena sank into a chair, devastated. So none of this was real. The courtship, the connection, the future. It was just manipulation. I was just a pawn. Helena, I'm sorry. Don't. She looked up, eyes bright with unshed tears. Don't apologize. You didn't orchestrate this. You're just trapped in it. We both are. She took a breath, straightened. What are you going to do with this evidence? Confront Constance, force her to release me from the marriage requirement, threaten public exposure if she refuses. That will destroy my father's reputation, his political career. I know. I'm sorry. Helena was silent for a long moment. Then she stood, composed herself with visible effort. I'll help you, Vivian gasped. Lady Helena, you can't. Yes, I can, because this is wrong, and I won't build my future on lies and coercion. She looked at Julian directly. But I have conditions. You don't just destroy Constance and my father publicly. You give them a chance to retreat with dignity. And you, she turned to Vivian, you stop planning to run away to Bath. If Julian is willing to fight for you, you need to be willing to fight too. I'm trying to protect him. You're trying to protect yourself from hoping. I understand. I do the same thing. But sometimes we have to be brave enough to accept what's offered, even when it seems impossible. Helena moved toward the door. I'll keep Constance occupied for the next hour. That gives you time to figure out your next move. But Julian, whatever you decide, decide soon. Tomorrow is your last full day before the ball. After that, circumstances will decide for you. She left, closing the door quietly behind her. Vivian and Julian stared at each other in the lamplight. She's right, Julian said finally. I need to confront Constance tomorrow, show her the evidence, force her hand. And if she refuses, if she calls your bluff, then I make it public and accept the consequences. Julian, no more waiting. No more hoping circumstances will magically improve. He pulled the letters from his jacket. I'm choosing you, Vivienne. Tomorrow, publicly, if necessary. And yes, it might cost me political alliances. It might cause scandal. It might make everything harder, but losing you is worse than any of that. Tears spilled down her cheeks again. I'm terrified. So am I. He pulled her close. But I'm more terrified of letting you walk away. They stood together in the dim office, holding each other while the house settled into night around them. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, choice, possible ruin. Tonight, they had each other. And for now, that was enough. The next morning arrived with unseasonable fog, thick and oppressive, turning Greystone Hall into something from a Gothic novel. Vivian woke with her stomach in knots, knowing what Julian planned to do today. She dressed carefully, her best day dress, her mother's pearl earrings, her composure worn like armor. If this went badly, she wanted to face it looking strong. Julian had requested a private meeting with Constance for 10 o'clock. He'd sent formal notice, phrased as estate business. Constance had no reason to suspect anything unusual. Vivian waited in her room, pacing, watching the clock. 9:30, 9:45. Any moment now. A knock on her door, Sarah looking nervous. Miss Carrow, His Grace requests your presence in the study, says it's urgent. Vivian's heart lurched. Now? Yes, miss, Lady Constance is already there. This was it. Julian was confronting Constance, and he wanted Vivian present. As witness, as support, as the reason he was doing this, she descended the main staircase on shaky legs, paused outside the study door, took a breath, knocked. Enter. She opened the door to find Julian standing behind his desk, formal and commanding in his ducal authority. Constance sat in a chair across from him, looking mildly annoyed at being summoned like a supplicant. Ah, Miss Carrow. Good. Close the door. Julian's voice was cold, controlled. You should hear this as well. Vivian closed the door, stood near it, ready to flee if necessary. Julian, really, this is dramatic even for you. Constance smiled indulgently. What's so urgent it requires private meetings and mysterious summons? This. Julian placed the letters on the desk between them. Correspondence between you and Lord Ashford. Dated from 3 years ago. Planning my marriage to Helena while my father was dying. Discussing how you'd manipulated him into adding the marriage clause when he was too ill to understand what he was signing. Constance went very still. Her eyes flicked to the letters, then to Vivian, then back to Julian. Where did you get those? That doesn't matter. What matters is their content. You committed fraud, Constance. You manipulated a dying man, forged his intentions, and built an entire scheme to control me. The marriage clause is invalid, and I have evidence to prove it. Silence fell like a guillotine blade. Constance's face went through several expressions: shock, calculation, and finally, cold fury. You went through my private correspondence. You manipulated my father's final will. I protected this family. I ensured you wouldn't make reckless choices based on sentiment instead of duty. Your father agreed. My father was mentally incompetent. The physician's notes confirm it. Any contract signed in that state is legally void. Constance stood slowly, dangerous. If you make those letters public, you'll destroy your own father's reputation. You'll admit he was weak, manipulable, unfit. Society will judge him, judge you, judge this entire family. Is that what you want? Public humiliation? I want my freedom, and I want you to release me from the marriage requirement. Why? So you can marry her? Constance's eyes fixed on Vivian with venom. A scandal. A woman with no family, no prospects, no value except whatever fantasy you've built around her. Watch your tone. Julian's voice went deadly quiet. Or what? You'll threaten me with exposure. Go ahead, Julian. Make those letters public. But understand what you're actually doing. You're admitting your father was senile. You're destroying Lord Ashford's political career, along with every reform alliance you've built. You're creating scandal that will follow you for decades. And for what? For this girl who will never truly belong in your world. She turned to Vivian directly. Tell him you'll never be accepted. That every ball, every dinner, every social event will be torture because they'll all know what you are. The companion who seduced above her station. Tell him that his children will be whispered about, his family pitied. Tell him that love, charming as it is, doesn't actually survive social exile. Vivian's throat closed. Because Constance was right. About all of it. She doesn't have to tell me anything, Julian said coldly. Because I've made my choice. You can release me from the marriage clause willingly, with dignity. Or I make these letters public and we all suffer the consequences. But either way, I'm not marrying Helena, and Vivian stays. You're willing to destroy everything for her? I'm willing to destroy a corrupt system that values appearance over truth. Constance laughed, bitter and sharp. How noble, how romantically foolish. Your father would be ashamed. My father was manipulated by you. I won't make the same mistake. Fine. Constance's voice turned to ice. Make your choice. Reveal the letters. Create your scandal. But understand this, Julian. You'll lose me as ally. You'll lose Ashford's political support. You'll lose half of society's respect. And when the initial flush of sentiment fades, when you realize what you've actually sacrificed, you'll resent her. That's how these stories always end. She moved to the door, paused. You have until tomorrow's ball. Make the announcement with Helena, or make your scandal. Choose. She swept out, leaving silence in her wake. Julian exhaled shakily. Vivian remained frozen by the door. That went about as well as expected, Julian muttered. Julian, she's right about all of it. The scandal, the consequences, Stop. He moved around the desk, came to her. Stop protecting me from my own choices. I know what this costs. I'm choosing it anyway. But Vivian Caro, he took her hands. I love you. Do you understand that? Not the idea of you, not rebellion against Constance. You, your intelligence, your courage, your infuriating nobility. I love you enough to fight for you. The question is, do you love me enough to let me? Her vision blurred with tears. I love you enough to want you to have everything you deserve, and I'm terrified I'm not it. You are. You always have been. He pulled her close. No more running. No more noble sacrifices. Tomorrow night at the ball, I'm making a choice. Publicly. And I want you beside me when I do. What choice? I'm going to refuse the engagement to Helena. I'm going to reveal Constance's fraud. And I'm going to ask you to marry me in front of 300 witnesses. Give them something real to gossip about. Vivian's breath stopped. Julian, that's insane. Probably, but I'm done being controlled by fear and propriety. Are you? She looked at him, this impossible, reckless, wonderful man who was willing to risk everything for her. And she realized Constance was wrong about one thing. Some loves did survive social exile. Some loves were strong enough to build new worlds when old ones collapsed. Yes, she whispered. I'm done running. He kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of promise. And for the first time in days, Vivian let herself believe in impossible things. The day of the ball arrived in chaos. Servants rushed through halls carrying flowers and candelabras and endless supplies. The kitchen produced mountains of food. Musicians arrived to practice in the ballroom. And throughout it all, a strange tension hummed beneath the surface. Helena had retreated to her rooms, claiming a headache. Constance moved through the preparations with icy efficiency, barely speaking to anyone. And Julian spent the morning closeted with his solicitor, finalizing plans. Vivian found herself organizing the final details, place cards, seating arrangements, the order of dancing. Work that should have gone to the future Duchess, but had somehow fallen to her instead. She was arranging flowers in the main hall when Lord Ashford arrived unexpectedly. Miss Carrow. He looked uncomfortable, formal. A word. She glanced around nervously, but they were relatively alone. Of course, Lord Ashford. My daughter informed me of certain discoveries, letters, between myself and Lady Constance. He cleared his throat. I want you to understand, those communications were not intended maliciously. I genuinely believed the marriage clause was in Julian's best interest. That structure and guidance would help him transition from military life to ducal responsibility. You helped Constance manipulate a dying man. I helped a concerned stepmother protect her family legacy. He said it defensively, but his eyes showed shame. I didn't realize. That is, I didn't fully appreciate how Edward's mental state had deteriorated. Constance assured me he was lucid, engaged, making informed decisions. And you believed her because it was convenient. Yes, the admission clearly cost him. I believed her because my daughter's future depended on this match, because my political alliances needed Greystone's support, because I told myself the ends justified the means. He looked directly at Vivian. I was wrong. She studied him, this powerful lord admitting fault to a companion. Why are you telling me this? Because Julian deserves truth, and because my daughter deserves better than a marriage built on lies. He handed her an envelope. This is my withdrawal from the arrangement. Formal documentation releasing Helena from any expectation of marriage to the Duke. She can present it tonight if needed. Lord Ashford, I can't undo what's been done, but I can step back now. Let Julian choose his own path, even if it's not the path I wanted. He paused. Helena speaks highly of you, Miss Carrow. Says you have integrity. I hope she's right. Because if Julian chooses you over duty, you'll need more than love to survive what comes next. You'll need strength, cunning, the ability to face society's worst and not break. I know what I'm facing. Do you? Really? Because loving a duke from a distance is very different from being his wife. Every decision you make will be scrutinized, every word twisted, every mistake magnified. His voice softened slightly. If you truly love him, make sure you're strong enough for what that means. He left before she could respond, leaving her holding the envelope with shaking hands. Was she strong enough? She'd survived scandal before, yes, but she'd survived by leaving, by hiding, by accepting exile. Could she survive by staying, by fighting? Whatever you're thinking, stop. Helena appeared from the music room, looking pale but determined. Father found you, didn't he? Gave you his guilty speech? He withdrew his support for the engagement. Good. About time he developed a conscience. Helena moved closer, voice dropping. Vivienne, I need you to understand something. Tonight at the ball, Julian is going to make a choice, a very public choice, and if you're not absolutely certain you can handle what comes after, tell him now. Don't let him destroy his life for someone who's going to run at the first real challenge. I'm not running, aren't you? You've been planning to leave for Bath this entire time. Even yesterday, even after everything, part of you was still looking for exits. I recognize it because I do the same thing. Helena's eyes were kind but challenging. Julian is willing to lose everything for you. Political allies, social standing, his stepmother's respect, his father's legacy. He's walking into fire. Will you walk with him, or will you let him burn alone? It was the question Vivienne had been avoiding, the central truth she'd been dancing around. Loving Julian from a distance was easy, safe, noble even, in its sacrifice. Loving him publicly, claiming him, standing beside him while society judged them both, that was terrifying. I don't know if I'm brave enough, Vivienne admitted quietly. None of us know until we try. But you need to decide before tonight. Because once Julian makes his announcement, there's no going back for either of you. Helena squeezed her hand briefly. I'm rooting for you, you know. Even though this entire situation is insane and improper and will probably scandalize half of England, I'm rooting for you both. She left, and Vivienne stood alone in the grand hall, surrounded by flowers and preparations for a ball that would change everything. The afternoon passed in a blur. By 6 o'clock, guests began arriving, carriages clogging the drive, society's elite descending in silk and jewels and expectations. Vivienne retreated to her small room to change. She had one good ball gown, kept from her previous life, deep midnight blue that made her eyes luminous. It wasn't current fashion. It wasn't impressive, but it was hers, and it made her feel like she still had some claim to dignity. She dressed carefully, arranged her hair, stared at her reflection, and tried to see what Julian saw, tried to believe she was worth the risk he was taking. A knock on her door. Sarah, breathless. Miss Carrow, His Grace is asking for you, says to come to his study before joining the ball. Vivienne's heart hammered. This was it. The moment before everything changed. She descended the back stairs, avoiding the main halls, now crowded with guests, knocked on Julian's study door. Come in. He stood by the window in full evening dress, devastating and formal, and absolutely terrified beneath the composure. When he saw her, something fierce and possessive flared in his eyes. You're beautiful. I'm scared. So am I. He moved closer, took her hands. Vivienne, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly, without noble sacrifice or worry about my feelings. Julian, do you want this? Truly? Not the scandal or the fight or the difficulty, but me, us. A future together, whatever that looks like, because in about an hour I'm going to walk into that ballroom and announce my choice. And I need to know you're choosing me too. This was the moment, the final chance to protect him by walking away. She looked at him, at the man who'd seen past her scandal to her truth, who'd valued her intelligence, who'd made her laugh when she thought she'd forgotten how, who loved her enough to risk everything, even when she told him not to. Yes, she said firmly, I choose you. I choose us, whatever comes next. Relief and joy washed across his face. He pulled her close, kissed her deeply. Then let's go cause some scandal. They walked together toward the ballroom, toward 300 judging eyes, toward their impossible future. The ball was in full swing when they entered, music and laughter and elegant dancers swirling across the floor. Constance held court near the refreshments, queenly and cold. Helena stood with her father, looking nervous but resolute. Julian's entrance caused immediate attention. The Duke, arriving late to his own ball, with his stepmother's companion on his arm. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Constance saw them and went very still, her face a mask of fury. Julian led Vivian to the center of the room. The musicians, sensing something significant, brought the current dance to an early close. Silence fell gradually as 300 guests turned to watch. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian's voice carried clear and strong, "thank you for joining us tonight. I have an announcement to make." Constance moved forward quickly. "Julian, perhaps this should wait." "No, it can't wait any longer." He looked directly at her. "Some of you may have heard rumors about an expected engagement tonight between myself and Lady Helena Ashford. I'm here to clarify that no such engagement exists or will exist." Gasps, shocked murmurs. Lord Ashford looked pained but unsurprised. Helena gave a small, sad smile. "Lady Helena is a wonderful woman who deserves a husband who can give her his whole heart. I cannot, because my heart belongs to someone else." He turned to Vivian, and the tenderness in his gaze made her want to cry. "Miss Vivian Carrow has been in my household for 3 months. In that time, she's shown more courage, integrity, and genuine care than most people I've known in my lifetime. She's challenged me, supported me, and made me remember that there's more to life than duty and expectation. And This is completely inappropriate." Constance's voice cut through. "Julian, you're making a scene. Miss Carrow is a scandal. Everyone knows what she did to Lord Whitmore. Everyone knows she's unsuitable. Everyone knows she told the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. Everyone knows she valued honesty over social comfort. Those aren't flaws. Those are the reasons I love her." The word hung in the gilded air, love. "And tonight," Julian continued, "I'm choosing truth over comfort too. My stepmother, Lady Constance, has been manipulating my life for years. She convinced my dying father to add a marriage clause to his will, a clause requiring me to marry within approved families or lose control of my estate. She did this while my father was mentally incompetent, unable to understand what he was signing." Shocked silence. Constance's face went white with fury. "I have evidence, letters proving the manipulation, correspondence between Lady Constance and others planning this arrangement years ago." Julian's voice hardened. "That clause is invalid. Any contract signed under those circumstances is fraud, and I won't be controlled by it any longer." "You'll destroy your own family's reputation," Constance hissed. "No, I'll save it from further corruption." Julian turned back to the assembled guests. "I know this is scandal. I know I'm breaking expectations. I know many of you will judge me, judge us. But I'm done living a life built on lies and manipulation. I'd rather have honesty with consequences than comfort with dishonesty." He took Vivian's hand, raised it gently. "Vivienne Carrow, in front of these witnesses, in front of society that will judge us, in front of everything that says this is impossible, will you marry me?" Vivian's world narrowed to his face, to the hope and fear and love she saw there, to the choice that would define the rest of her life. She could refuse, could save them both from scandal, could let him find another path to happiness, or she could be brave, could choose love over safety, could trust that sometimes impossible things became possible through sheer force of will. "Yes," she said, voice clear and strong. "Yes, I'll marry you." The ballroom erupted, some in applause, some in shock. some in scandalized disapproval. But beneath it all, something else, the sound of a world shifting, making room for a different kind of story. Constance's voice cut through the chaos. "You're a fool, Julian. Both of you are fools. You've destroyed everything for sentiment that will fade. And when it does, when reality sets in, you'll regret this, I promise you that. Then I'll regret it together with her. That's still better than living a lie." Julian looked at Constance with finality. "You're welcome to remain at Greystone in a separate residence with a pension, but your control over this family ends tonight. Choose your next move carefully." Constance stared at him, at Vivian, at the assembled crowd witnessing her defeat. Then she turned and swept from the ballroom back, rigid with fury and humiliation. Lord Ashford approached, Helena beside him. "Your Grace, for what it's worth, you have my apologies, and my support going forward. I chose politics over honor. I won't make that mistake again. Thank you, Lord Ashford. That means more than you know." Helena hugged Vivian quickly. "Be happy," she whispered. "Be impossibly, scandalously happy. You've both earned it." Gradually, cautiously, some guests began to approach, offering congratulations, curious questions, careful assessments of this new reality. Others left early, offended or scandalized. But enough stayed, enough accepted, enough to begin building something new. Julian and Vivian danced together for the first time while 300 people watched, and Vivian realized something profound. This was her life now, not hiding in the shadows, not accepting exile, but standing in the center of it all and claiming her place. She was terrified, she was exhilarated, she was choosing to be brave. "No regrets," Julian murmured as they moved across the floor. "Hundreds, but none of them are about this." He laughed, and it was free and genuine and full of hope. They danced until midnight, until most guests had departed, until the ballroom felt more intimate than grand. And when the last carriage rolled away and the house finally fell silent, they stood together in the entrance hall, holding each other. "So what now?" Vivienne asked softly. "Now we deal with the consequences, the scandal, the politics, the social judgment. Now we fight for every inch of the future we want." He pulled back to look at her. "Now we prove that sentiment doesn't fade, that love can survive reality, that choosing each other was worth it, and if we fail, then we fail together. That's still better than succeeding alone." She kissed him, gentle and claiming. "I love you, Julian Blackwell, impossibly, inconveniently, completely. Say that again. I love you. Once more, I'm memorizing it." She laughed, and it felt like freedom. "I love you. Forever. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." They climbed the grand staircase together as dawn began to break through the windows. Tomorrow would bring challenges, restructuring political alliances, managing Constance's departure, facing society's judgment. Tomorrow would test them, but tonight they had each other. They had choice. They had a future they'd fought for, and that was enough. Epilogue 3 months later. The wedding was small and private, exactly as they'd wanted. 50 guests in Greystone's chapel, mostly tenants and estate families who'd known Julian since childhood, a handful of allies from London who'd stood by them through the scandal, Helena, who'd become an unexpected friend, Lord Ashford, who'd quietly helped rebuild political bridges. Constance had not attended. She'd taken her pension and separate residence, retreated into social exile with remarkable dignity. Vivian felt almost sorry for her. Almost. The ceremony itself was simple, beautiful. Vivienne wore a dress of ivory silk, nothing elaborate, just elegant. Julian wore his military medals, a reminder of who he'd been before titles and expectations. When the vicar pronounced them married, the small congregation erupted in genuine joy. No scandal here, no judgment, just celebration of two people brave enough to choose each other. The wedding breakfast was held in Greystone's gardens under warm September sun. Vivienne moved through the gathering, accepting congratulations, feeling overwhelmed and grateful, and more herself than she'd ever felt. She found Julian near the rose garden, talking with his estate manager about upcoming harvest plans. Even on his wedding day, he was thinking about responsibilities. She loved him for it. "Your Grace," she teased, approaching. "Shouldn't you be celebrating instead of working?" He pulled her close. "Your Grace," he returned with a grin. "I'm celebrating by discussing how we're going to expand tenant contracts to include more protections, romance." She laughed. "You're impossible. And you love me anyway." "I really do." They stood together watching their guests. Tenants mingling with lords, servants laughing with ladies, social hierarchies temporarily suspended in favor of genuine connection. "We changed something," Vivienne said quietly. "Didn't we? By choosing this, by refusing to accept what we were supposed to accept. We changed everything." Julian's arm tightened around her waist. "The scandal's already fading. New gossip is replacing old gossip, and we're building something better here, a household based on honesty instead of performance, a partnership based on choice instead of obligation. Your political allies are coming back around." Slowly, carefully, but yes, it turns out integrity is more compelling than anyone expected. He kissed her temple. "We're going to be fine, Vivienne. Better than fine. We're going to be happy." A young maid approached nervously, one of the new staff they'd hired after Constance's departure. "Your Graces, the girl looking for the companion position has arrived. Should I tell her you're occupied?" Vivienne and Julian exchanged glances. "No," Vivienne said gently. "I'll speak with her." "Where is she?" "The small parlour, Your Grace. She seems frightened." Vivienne found the girl in the parlour, barely 20, dressed in shabby genteel clothes that marked her as impoverished gentry. She looked up when Vivienne entered, and her eyes went wide. "Your Grace, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. They said the Duchess wanted to interview personally, but I thought, sit, please." Vivienne gestured to a comfortable chair. "What's your name?" "Alice. Alice Thornbury, Your Grace." She twisted her hands nervously. "I know my family isn't. That is, we're not. You don't need to explain. I understand." Vivienne sat across from her. "Why do you want this position, Alice?" The girl hesitated, then seemed to decide honesty was her only option. "I need work. My father died last year, and my brother gambled away what little we had left. I'm educated, I can read and write and manage correspondence, but no one will hire me because—" She trailed off, embarrassed. "Because? Because I refused to marry a man who beat his last wife. Refused publicly, and now everyone says I'm difficult, opinionated, unsuitable." Her voice broke slightly. "I just want a chance, Your Grace, a chance to prove I can be more than my mistakes." Vivienne's chest tightened with recognition. She saw herself in this girl, proud and frightened and desperate for someone to see past scandal to truth. "Alice," she said gently, "you are not here to leave. You are here to stay, as long as you choose. This household values honesty, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. You'll work hard, yes, but you'll be respected, protected, given opportunity to grow beyond whatever people say you are." Alice's eyes filled with tears. "Your Grace, Thank you, thank you." "Don't thank me yet. The Duchess of Greystone position comes with expectations." Vivienne smiled. "But I think you're strong enough to meet them." She hired Alice on the spot, with fair wages and a real contract. As she watched the girl leave, walking taller, hopeful, Vivienne felt something shift in her chest. This was why they'd fought, not just for their own happiness, but to build something different, a place where women like Alice, like Vivienne herself, could find safety and opportunity and choice. She returned to the garden where Julian was waiting. "How did it go?" he asked. "I hired her," She's perfect. Of course she is. You see people clearly. He pulled her into the shade of an old oak tree, away from the guests. I have something for you. Wedding gift. He handed her a small leather journal, worn and personal. She opened it to find pages covered in Julian's handwriting, entries dating back months. Met her today, Miss Caro. She defended a housemaid against Constance's criticism. Everyone else was silent. She spoke. Don't know what to make of her yet, but I'm intrigued. Found her in the library at midnight. We talked for 2 hours. She's brilliant, sharp and funny and completely unaware of how extraordinary she is. She's leaving in 5 days. Constance gave her ultimatum. I can't let this happen. Won't let this happen. Whatever it costs. I love her. Wrote it here first because I needed to see it in words, to make it real. I love Vivian Caro, and I'm going to fight for her. Vivian's hands trembled as she read. Page after page of Julian's private thoughts, his growing feelings, his determination to choose her even when it seemed impossible. The final entry was dated yesterday, their wedding day. Today, I marry the woman who changed everything, who taught me that duty without love is just performance, who showed me that sometimes the bravest thing is to choose happiness over expectation. I spent years believing I had to sacrifice myself for others. Vivienne taught me that choosing joy, choosing love, choosing authentically, that serves others better than martyrdom ever could. Today I become the luckiest man alive. Today I choose forever. Tears streamed down her face. Julian, I wanted you to know, he said softly, that this wasn't impulse or rebellion or temporary sentiment. I've been choosing you for months, every day, every moment, even when you tried to leave, even when it seemed impossible. I kept choosing you. She kissed him, tasting salt and gratitude and overwhelming love. I choose you too, every day, forever. They stayed under the oak tree, holding each other while their guests celebrated nearby. The future stretched ahead, uncertain in details, but absolutely certain in foundation. They would face challenges. Society wouldn't forget the scandal immediately. Political alliances would require careful rebuilding. Constance's shadow would linger in whispers and judgment. But they would face it together, with honesty, courage, and the kind of love that refused to accept impossible as final. Your Grace? Alice appeared at the edge of the garden, looking apologetic. The guests are asking for you both, for the first toast. Tell them we're coming, Vivian said with a smile. Tell them the Duke and Duchess of Greystone are ready. Alice grinned and ran back. Julian stood, offered his hand. Ready, Your Grace? For everything. She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. For scandal and challenge and building something better, for a life that's honest instead of easy, for forever with you. That's quite a commitment. You're worth it. They walked back to their celebration, to their guests, to their future, and Vivienne thought about a scared girl who'd been told she had 5 days to leave, who'd been treated as temporary, disposable, insignificant. That girl was gone. In her place stood the Duchess of Greystone, a woman who'd been chosen, fought for, and given forever instead of exile. The evening stretched into night, filled with dancing and laughter, and the beginning of something new. When the last guest finally departed and they stood alone in Greystone's grand entrance hall, Julian pulled Vivian close one more time. No regrets? He asked, echoing their earlier conversation. None that matter. She looked up at him, this impossible man who'd chosen her over everything. She said I had 5 days to leave. You gave me a lifetime to stay. He smiled, that free and genuine smile she'd fallen in love with. Forever isn't long enough, but it's a start. They climbed the stairs together toward their private chambers, toward their wedding night, toward the rest of their lives. Behind them, Greystone Hall settled into peaceful silence, a house that had witnessed manipulation and control for so long, now witnessing something better. Love. Choice. 2 people brave enough to build their own future. And in the morning, when Alice knocked nervously on the Duchess's door with correspondence, Vivienne would open it with a smile and say the words she'd needed to hear all her life. You are not here to leave. You are here to stay, as long as you choose. Because some stories end with exile, but the best stories, the truest stories, end with belonging. And Vivienne Blackwell, Duchess of Greystone, finally belonged. She said I had 5 days. He gave me forever. The end. Thank you for staying with Julian and Vivienne's story until the very end. If you felt their fight for love, if you believed in their impossible choice, I'd be so grateful if you'd share your thoughts in the comments below. These characters live because you're here listening to their journey. Subscribe and hit the bell if you want more stories about choosing love over expectations, courage over comfort, and authentic connection over societal approval. Thank you for being here. You're the reason these stories exist.